My babysitting boss called me a kidnapper for protecting her abandoned daughter. When I confronted her, she rolled her eyes and said, "If you ever contact my children again, I'll sue you." I stayed silent. That was 1 month ago. Today, her daughter showed the whole school what really happened behind closed doors. I was only 15 when this wealthy couple hired me to watch their 3 kids, ages 4, 6, and 9. Right away, I knew something was off. The youngest was in a wheelchair. The middle child had serious medical issues that required constant monitoring. And the oldest? She'd basically become a third parent at just 9 years old. What made babysitting for them even worse is that I was never notified of when I'd have to babysit. The parents would call me up at random hours, tell me they were going out and had left $50 on the counter for pizza, and by the time I'd show up, they'd be gone. Now I know what you're thinking. Just say no. But that wasn't an option. My family was poor, barely getting by. We relied on my babysitting money, and the parents of the kids knew this and exploited it fully. I worked long hours, sometimes even full weekends, but still it was manageable, until the day I asked the Richardsons for one favor. Just one. My mom had just undergone gallbladder surgery, and I was acting as her primary caretaker. I asked the Richardson if they could put me on a schedule for babysitting and avoid giving me spontaneous babysitting duties just for the next 2 months while I helped mom with her recovery. The mother's face went cold as marble when I asked. She exchanged a look with her husband before responding in that sugar-sweet, fake, nice tone. "We specifically hired you for flexibility, dear, but I suppose just for 2 months we can make an exception. We'll send you a schedule starting tomorrow." I thanked them over and over, and for the first 3 or so weeks, they stuck to their word. There was no spontaneity. Until 32 days after my mom's surgery, I got a text from the mom. "Hey, we figure it's been enough time. Your mom should be all good by now. Me and Jeff are leaving for a 4-day spa retreat in a few hours. Money for food is on the fireplace. Thank you." I was in disbelief. I called them immediately, but my call went to voicemail. I asked my mom what I should do, and she told me to go. She said we needed the money, and so I raced over, and by the time I got there, the house was already empty, with no one but the 4 kids who'd grown used to being abandoned. I remember feeling incredible rage, and day 2 of this 4-day trip made me even angrier. Emily, the girl with health complications, started having some sort of reaction during lunch, and her breathing became ragged gasps. I called Megan, the mom, in absolute panic as Emily's skin turned red and blotchy, but through the spa music in the background, I heard her annoyed sigh. "God, why are you bothering me on my holiday? Just ask Layla. She handles this all the time." My hands shook, but I called the 9-year-old Layla, and she calmly retrieved the medicine needed. She administered it, then monitored Emily's breathing while checking her pulse against her Tinkerbell watch. As Emily's airways opened, Layla explained she'd been doing this since she was 6. I hit record on my phone for the first time that day. The breaking point came 3 weeks later. Jason, the 4-year-old in the wheelchair, had tried to transfer himself to the bathtub while I was helping Emily with her medications. He fell. The crash echoed through the house. Red poured from his head as he lay crumpled on the bathroom floor, barely conscious. I called Megan and caught her during another wine tasting. I could hear her drunk laugh before she answered. When I explained Jason was bleeding and might have a concussion, she actually groaned. "Oh my God, not now. Layla knows what to do. She's handled worse." I called Layla again and watched in horror as she appeared with an actual medical suture kit she'd kept in her closet for emergencies. She assessed Jason's wound like she'd done it 100 times, then began cleaning it while humming Jason's favorite song to keep him conscious. For 2 hours, this 9-year-old child administered local anesthetic and placed 15 perfect stitches while checking his pupils for signs of concussion. When they finally returned home 2 more days later, they barely glanced at Jason's injury. Megan posted vacation photos tagged blessed and self-care while handing me my regular babysitting rate rounded down. It was around this time I made my decision. It was completely solidified after I found Layla teaching Emily how to inject insulin at 2 in the morning while the parents were out at a gala. By this point, I had collected dozens of recordings of Megan and Jeff practically admitting to their neglect. Everything from them drunkenly telling me to get Layla to handle medical emergencies over phone to admitting to not really caring if Jason's bleeding or not. I filed the report with CPS the next day. I was babysitting, and when the parents came home, I stalled them just long enough for the social worker to show up. She rang the doorbell, and she did it basically right on time, because Layla was nursing Emily in the kitchen at that very moment, and Jason was in his wheelchair trying to make himself a sandwich. When Megan and Jeff answered the door, they looked at the worker with a confused look. "Oh yeah, I called CPS on you," I told them from behind. The social worker introduced herself as Ms. Casey and asked to come inside. Megan's face went from confused to furious in about 2 seconds. Jeff just stood there with his mouth open. I watched them try to compose themselves while Ms. Casey explained she'd received a report about potential neglect. Megan immediately turned on the charm, inviting Ms. Casey in and offering her coffee. I stayed in the living room with the kids while they talked in the kitchen. I could hear Megan's fake laugh echoing through the house. About 20 minutes later, Ms. Casey asked to speak with the children. Megan agreed, but insisted on being present. That's when Layla surprised everyone. She asked if she could show Ms. Casey her room. Megan tried to object, but Ms. Casey said it was standard procedure. I followed them upstairs and watched Layla pull out her first aid kit from the closet. She explained each item to Ms. Casey, showing her the bandages, the medications, the medical logs she'd been keeping in a purple notebook. Ms. Casey's face got more serious with each item. When they came back downstairs, Ms. Casey said she'd need to conduct a full investigation. She took my contact information and said she'd be in touch. Megan and Jeff walked her to the door, all smiles and promises of cooperation. The second the door closed, Megan whirled on me. Her face was twisted with rage. Jeff grabbed her arm before she could say anything. He told me to get my things and leave. I gathered my stuff quickly, said goodbye to the kids, and left. I thought that would be the end of my involvement. I was wrong. The next morning, I woke up to find my mom crying at the kitchen table. She'd gotten a call from 3 of her cleaning clients canceling their services. No explanation, just sudden cancellations. We needed that money for rent. I had a sick feeling in my stomach. Throughout the day, more cancellations came in. By evening, my mom had lost half her client base. I knew it had to be connected to the Richardsons. They had connections all over town. The following week, I couldn't get a single babysitting job. Parents who'd been begging for my help suddenly weren't returning my calls. One mom, Mrs. Peterson, finally told me the truth when I ran into her at the grocery store. She pulled me aside and whispered that she'd heard I was unstable and had made false accusations against a respectable family. She said she was sorry but couldn't risk hiring me. I tried to explain, but she hurried away. Things got worse from there. I started noticing Megan's car driving slowly past our apartment. Sometimes she'd just sit there, parked across the street, staring at our windows. I took pictures every time, but what could I do with them? My mom told me to ignore it, that we'd get through this, but I could see the stress wearing on her. She was still recovering from surgery and now had to worry about making rent. 2 weeks after the CVS visit, I was walking home from school when I found all 4 tires on my bike slashed. The bike was locked up at the community center where I volunteered. Security cameras didn't cover that area. I had to walk 3 miles home in the dark. A car followed me slowly for the first mile. I couldn't see who was driving, but I ran the rest of the way home. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely unlock our door. The fear stayed with me for days, making me jump at every shadow and unexpected unexpected sound. I started taking different routes home from school, doubling back through alleys and side streets to make sure I wasn't being followed. Ms. Casey called me 3 days later. She wanted to meet at a coffee shop downtown to discuss the case. I told my mom I was going to study at the library and took the bus. Ms. Casey was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with a thick folder. She bought me a hot chocolate and got straight to the point. She said the initial home visit had raised serious concerns. The medical supplies Layla had shown her were troubling. No 9-year-old should be performing medical procedures on siblings. She asked me about the recordings I'd mentioned in my report. I pulled out my phone and played them for her. Her face got darker with each one. She took notes and asked for copies. I emailed them to her right there. She said this would help the investigation significantly, but she also warned me that the Richardsons had hired a lawyer and were claiming I was a disgruntled employee trying to extort them. I told her about the slashed tires and the stalking. She frowned and said to document everything and consider filing a police report. I knew that would just make things worse though. When I got home, my mom was on the phone. Her face was pale. She hung up and told me our landlord had called. Someone had reported us for having too many people living in our 2-bedroom apartment. It was just me and her, but now the landlord wanted to do an inspection. We both knew who was behind this. The inspection was scheduled for the next week. We spent days cleaning and organizing, making sure everything was perfect. The stress was making my mom's recovery slower. She wasn't sleeping well and I caught her crying in the bathroom twice. I wanted to confront the Richardsons, but knew that would play right into their hands. They wanted me to look unstable and aggressive, so I kept my head down and documented everything. I took screenshots of weird calls we were getting. I saved voicemails where people just breathed into the phone. I photographed every time I saw their cars near our home or school. The inspection went fine. The landlord found nothing wrong and seemed confused about the complaint, but the message was clear. The Richardsons could make our lives miserable whenever they wanted. That same week, I was called to the principal's office. Someone had sent an anonymous letter claiming I was selling substances at school. The principal, Mr. Rodriguez, didn't believe it but had to follow protocol. They searched my locker and backpack. Of course, they found nothing. Mr. Rodriguez apologized and said he knew I was a good student, but now there was a record of me being investigated. Another mark against my character. I started eating lunch in empty classrooms to avoid the stares and whispers. Some kids had heard about the search and rumors were spreading. I overheard someone say I'd been caught with pills. Another said I'd threatened a teacher. None of it was true, but truth didn't matter anymore. 2 weeks passed with more of the same. Harassment, rumors, isolation. Then Ms. Casey called again. The investigation was progressing, but she needed more evidence. She asked if I could get in touch with any former babysitters or anyone else who might have witnessed the neglect. I remembered a girl named Sophia who'd babysat for them before me. I found her on social media and sent a message. She responded immediately. She wanted to meet in person. We met at a park the next day. Sophia looked nervous, constantly checking over her shoulder. She told me she'd lasted 3 months with the Richardsons before quitting. She'd seen the same things I had. Kids taking care of kids. Parents gone for days. Medical emergencies handled by children. She said she'd tried to say something once and Megan had threatened to ruin her college applications. Sophia was applying to nursing school and couldn't risk it, but she said she'd talk to Ms. Casey if it would help those kids. I gave her Ms. Casey's number and thanked her. Finally, someone else who understood. That night, I was doing homework when my mom got a call. Her face went white as she listened. She hung up and told me Megan Richardson had called. She'd offered my mom $1,000 to make me recant my statement. My mom had hung up on her. We both knew this was escalating. The next morning, I found a note under our door. It was typed, no signature. It said I had 1 week to withdraw my CPS report or things would get much worse. I saved the note and took pictures of it. My hands were shaking as I texted Ms. Casey about this new threat. She called immediately and said this was witness intimidation. She urged me to file a police report. I finally agreed. My mom came with me to the station. The officer who took our report seemed skeptical until I showed him all my documentation, the photos, the recordings, the note. He said they'd look into it, but without proof the Richardsons were behind it, there wasn't much they could do. 3 days later, I was babysitting for the Johnsons, one of the few families still hiring me. Their daughter Emma was asleep, and I was watching TV when I got a text from Mrs. Johnson. She said she was coming home early. Something felt off about the message, but I didn't think much of it. 20 minutes later, the doorbell rang. I checked the peephole and saw 2 police officers. My heart started racing. I opened the door and they asked if I was alone with a child. I said yes. The parents were out. They said they'd received a call about a teenager possibly stealing from the home. I knew immediately what was happening. I called Mrs. Johnson right away and put her on speaker. She confirmed she hadn't called the police and was still at dinner. The officers realized it was a false report and apologized, but I was shaking. The Richardsons were trying to get me arrested. Mrs. Johnson came home immediately. She was furious about the false report and said she'd vouch for me if needed, but I could see the doubt creeping into her eyes. Who wants a babysitter who brings police to their door? She paid me for the full night, but I knew she wouldn't call again. Another job lost. Another family scared away. I walked home in the dark, jumping at every car that passed. When I got home, I found my mom pacing the living room. Someone had called her work and told her boss she was stealing cleaning supplies. Her boss didn't believe it, but warned her that someone was trying to cause trouble. We sat at the kitchen table and tried to figure out what to do. We couldn't afford a lawyer. We couldn't move. We were trapped. The next day at school, I found my locker decorated with printed screenshots. They were fake social media posts, made to look like mine, saying horrible things about the Richardson kids, calling them brats, saying they deserved neglectful parents. I tore them down, but people had already seen them. Even my friends were looking at me differently. I tried to explain they were fake, but who would believe me? I spent lunch in the bathroom, crying in a stall. I felt so alone. After school, I went straight home. I found Layla sitting on our front steps. She was alone, which scared me. 9-year-olds shouldn't be wandering around alone. She said she'd taken the bus. She needed to talk to me. I brought her inside and called Megan to let her know Layla was safe. Megan screamed at me, accused me of kidnapping her daughter. I put her on speaker so Layla could tell her mom she'd come on her own. Megan demanded I bring her home immediately. Layla asked for 5 minutes to talk. Megan hung up. Layla pulled a flash drive from her backpack. She said it had videos she'd taken on her tablet. Videos of her taking care of her siblings while her parents were gone. Videos of medical emergencies. Videos of her parents leaving for days. She'd been documenting everything for over a year. She said she was scared but couldn't watch her siblings suffer anymore. I hugged her and told her she was brave. Then I drove her home, the flash drive hidden in my pocket. Megan was waiting outside, furious. She grabbed Layla's arm and dragged her inside without a word to me. Jeff came out and told me if I ever contacted their children again, they'd sue me for everything. I drove away knowing things were about to get worse. But now I had Layla's evidence. I went straight to Miss Casey's office. She stayed late to review the videos with me. Her face was grim as she watched 9-year-old Layla practicing CPR on a stuffed animal, explaining she'd learned in case Emily stopped breathing. Another video showed Layla helping Jason with his physical therapy exercises at 3 a.m. while her parents were in Vegas. There were dozens more. Miss Casey said this was exactly what they needed. She made copies and said the case was moving to urgent status. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those kids alone in that house. The next morning, my mom woke me up early. She'd gotten an email from our landlord. The Richardsons had offered to buy our apartment building. The landlord was considering it. If they became our landlords, they could evict us easily. property. We had no lease protection. My mom was trying not to cry. I told her about Layla's videos. It gave her hope, but we both knew the Richardsons wouldn't stop. They had money and connections. We had nothing but the truth. That afternoon, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. It was a woman named Patricia. She said she was the Richardsons' housekeeper, former housekeeper. She'd been fired the week before for asking about the children's welfare. She wanted to help. We met at a diner across town. Patricia had worked for the family for 2 years. She'd seen everything: the medical emergencies, the abandonment, the parentification. She'd tried to help when she could, but Megan had threatened her job. Patricia was supporting 3 kids of her own and couldn't afford to lose the income. But when she saw Jason's bandaged head, she'd finally spoken up. Megan fired her on the spot. Patricia said she'd testify if needed. She gave me her number and said to have Ms. Casey call her. Another witness. Another person who'd seen the truth. I was starting to feel less alone, but the Richardsons must have been watching. That night, our apartment was broken into while we were at the grocery store. Nothing was stolen, but things were moved. Drawers opened, papers scattered. The message was clear. They could get to us whenever they wanted. I called the police, but without evidence of forced entry or theft. They just filed a report. My mom installed new locks, but we both knew it wouldn't matter. If the Richardsons wanted in, they'd find a way. I started keeping all my evidence in multiple places. Copies with Ms. Casey, some with my school counselor, some in a safety deposit box my mom scraped together money for. I wasn't taking chances. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. I knew they were planning something. Then Friday came. I was in history class when the principal called me to the office. My mom was there, pale and shaking. Someone had planted jewelry in my backpack during gym class. Expensive jewelry that had been reported stolen from a house I'd babysat at months ago. The family, the Brennans, were friends with the Richardsons. They'd found their missing jewelry and immediately accused me. The police were called. I was questioned for 2 hours. Thank God I'd been at a doctor's appointment with my mom when the theft supposedly happened. We had receipts, sign-in sheets, everything. The detective seemed to realize something was off. The jewelry had no fingerprints, not even the owner's. It had mysteriously appeared in my backpack right after I'd reported the Richardsons. He said they'd investigate further, but let me go. My mom drove me home in silence. We both knew how close that had been. If we hadn't had that alibi, I'd be in jail right now. The Richardsons were playing dirty, and they were getting desperate. That weekend, Megan called my mom again. This time she offered $5,000. She said it was a gift, no strings attached. All I had to do was tell Ms. Casey I'd exaggerated, maybe misunderstood some situations. Kids could be dramatic after all. My mom recorded the call. Megan's voice was sweet as honey, but we could hear the threat underneath. She mentioned how hard it must be to make rent on a cleaner's salary, how teenage criminal records could follow someone forever, how unfortunate it would be if more valuables went missing from homes I'd visited. My mom told her no amount of money would make us lie. Megan's voice turned cold. She said we'd regret this. Then she hung up. We added the recording to our evidence file. Monday morning, I found out what she meant by regret. My mom's remaining cleaning clients all called to cancel. Every single one. They gave vague excuses, but we knew. The Richardsons had gotten to them all. We had no income now. Rent was due in 2 weeks. My mom tried to stay strong, but I heard her on the phone with my aunt, begging for a loan. I felt guilty. This was my fault. I'd stood up to the wrong people, and now my mom was paying for it. But then I thought about Layla, bandaging her brother's head at 9 years old. About Emily, struggling to breathe while her parents drank wine. About Mia and Jason, abandoned for days. I couldn't back down. Those kids needed someone to fight for them. I started looking for jobs, but my reputation was ruined. Every place I applied seemed to already know about me. The troubled teen who made false accusations, the thief, the liar, even fast food places turned me down. I was radioactive. My mom applied for emergency assistance, but it would take weeks to process. We started selling things. My bike, even though it still had slashed tires. Mom's jewelry from my grandmother. Anything worth money. We ate ramen every night and kept the heat low. I wore extra layers to school to hide that I was wearing the same clothes repeatedly, but we survived, and the investigation continued. Ms. Casey called with updates when she could. More witnesses had come forward. Former teachers who'd noticed things, neighbors who'd seen the kids alone for days. The evidence was piling up. Then came the confrontation. It was at a school fundraiser. My mom had volunteered months ago and felt obligated to help despite everything. I went with her for support. The Richardsons were there, of course. They were sponsors. Their name on a big banner. Megan saw us and smirked. She walked over, designer heels clicking on the gym floor. She stood close, too close, and spoke quietly. She said we were destroying her family, that her children would end up in foster care because of my lies, that I'd regret this for the rest of my life. I stayed calm and said her children deserved better. That's when she snapped. She raised her voice, accused me of harassment, said I was stalking her family, traumatizing her children. People started staring. She was making a scene, playing the victim. That's when Layla appeared. She must have slipped away from the kids area. She walked up to her mother and spoke clearly. She said she wasn't traumatized by me. She was traumatized by being a doctor to her siblings since age 6. The gym went silent. Megan tried to grab her, but Layla stepped back. She pulled out her tablet and started showing people videos. Her helping Emily with medications. Her teaching Mia how to recognize diabetic shock. Her bandaging Jason's wounds. Teachers gasped. Parents covered their mouths. Someone started recording. Megan tried to grab the tablet, but Jeff held her back. He knew it was over. Everyone was watching now. Years of secrets spilling out in a middle school gym. Ms. Casey arrived 15 minutes later. Someone had called her about the scene. She took Layla aside to talk while uniformed officers kept the parents away. Other parents started approaching me and my mom, apologizing, saying they'd had no idea. Mrs. Peterson hugged me and said she was sorry for believing the rumors. The Brennans admitted they'd been pressured to make the theft accusation. More people came forward with things they'd noticed but ignored. The perfect family facade was crumbling in real time. By the end of the night, the Richardson kids were in temporary protective custody. The parents were being investigated for criminal neglect and witness intimidation. Our landlord called to say the sale was off and apologized for the stress. My mom's clients started calling back, ashamed they'd believed the lies. It wasn't over yet. There would be court hearings and investigations. The kids would need therapy and proper care. But that night in the gym, watching Layla finally tell her truth, I knew we'd won the important battle. The kids were safe. The truth was out. The Richardsons couldn't hurt anyone anymore. Megan and Jeff left town within a month. Their reputation was destroyed. Their social circle gone. They moved 3 states away to start over. The kids were placed with Jeff's sister, who'd been trying to get custody for years but had been blocked by the parents' influence. She enrolled Layla in a program for gifted students where she could use her intelligence for herself, not survival. Emily got proper medical care from actual doctors. Jason got physical therapy and adaptive equipment. Mia got to be a kid for the first time in years. I started babysitting again. Families actually sought me out, saying they wanted someone who'd protect their kids like I'd protected the Richardsons. My mom rebuilt her client base stronger than before. People respected her for standing by me. We made rent that month and every month after. I kept in touch with Layla. She sent me updates about her siblings, pictures of them smiling and playing. Real smiles, not the forced ones from before. She thanked me for giving her the courage to speak up. I told her she'd always had the courage. She just needed someone to stand with her. Ms. Casey said it was one of the worst neglect cases she'd seen that didn't involve physical abuse. The The medical neglect alone was staggering. She thanked me for not backing down despite the harassment. She said most people would have given up. Sometimes I think about how different things could have been if I'd taken the money, if I'd stayed quiet, if I'd let fear win. But then I remember Emily's blue lips as she gasped for air, Jason's blood on the bathroom floor, Layla's tiny hands doing work no child should know. And I know I made the right choice. It cost us everything for a while. Our income, our reputation, our peace of mind, but those kids got their childhood back. That was worth any price. The last time I saw Layla, she was laughing at something on her phone. Just a normal kid doing normal kid things. No medical supplies in sight, no emergency procedures memorized. Just a girl getting to be 11 years old. That image made every threat, every slashed tire, every lost job worth it. Sometimes doing the right thing costs everything, but sometimes everything is exactly what it takes to save someone, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat. The next few weeks were intense. The kids' aunt Rebecca turned out to be amazing. She'd been fighting for them for years, but Jeff always blocked her. She moved into their house temporarily so the kids could stay in familiar surroundings while everything got sorted out. I visited a few times to help with the transition. Layla was still taking care of everyone out of habit. Rebecca had to keep reminding her that adults were in charge now. The criminal investigation moved fast after the fundraiser incident. Turns out when you publicly admit to making your 9-year-old perform medical procedures, prosecutors get interested real quick. The Richardsons hired the best lawyers money could buy, but even they couldn't spin the videos Layla had taken, especially the one where Megan literally told her 6-year-old daughter over FaceTime how to help Emily with her insulin while she was at a wine tasting. That video went viral in our town. Everyone had seen it by the end of the week. My mom and I were subpoenaed as witnesses. We had to give depositions about everything we'd seen and documented. The Richardsons' lawyer tried to paint me as a vindictive teenager, but my evidence was solid. Every recording timestamped, every incident documented. Patricia, the housekeeper, testified too. She brought her own photos of the medical supplies Layla kept hidden around the house. Apparently there were stashes everywhere, under beds, in closets, even in the garage. Also, Layla could quickly access what she needed for her siblings. The Richardsons tried one last manipulation. They had their lawyer contact us about a settlement. They'd pay for my college if I agreed to testify that things weren't as bad as they seemed, that maybe I'd misunderstood some situations. My mom laughed when she heard the offer. We were eating dollar store mac and cheese for the 3rd night in a row, but she laughed. She said no amount of money could buy our integrity. The lawyer seemed surprised we turned it down. Meanwhile, life started getting back to normal. Sort of. Kids at school still whispered when I walked by, but now it was different. Instead of calling me a liar, they called me brave. I didn't feel brave. I felt tired. My mom got her clients back plus some new ones. Turns out standing up to the town's power couple earned her respect. People wanted someone with backbone cleaning their homes. We even managed to save a little money after a few months. I kept babysitting for the families who'd stuck by me. The Johnsons called me back after they heard the truth. Mrs. Johnson apologized for doubting me even for a second. She said she should have known the Richardsons were behind the false police report. She gave me a raise and recommended me to all her friends. Soon I had more babysitting jobs than I could handle. It felt good to be trusted again. The preliminary hearing was rough. Seeing the Richardsons in court, trying to look like concerned parents, made me angry. Megan wore a conservative dress and kept dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Jeff sat stone-faced beside her. Their lawyer argued that they were just busy parents who relied too heavily on their mature oldest daughter. He tried to make it sound like Layla wanted to help, like she enjoyed the responsibility. Then the prosecutor played the video of 4-year-old Jason screaming while Layla cleaned and bandaged his head wound. The courtroom went silent. Even the judge looked sick. Layla had to testify via video link. Rebecca didn't want her in the same room as her parents. Layla was calm and clear. She listed every medical procedure she'd learned, every emergency she'd handled alone. Every night she'd stayed awake monitoring her siblings' vital signs. She showed the court her purple notebook where she'd logged everything. Pages and pages of medical notes in a child's handwriting. The judge had to call a recess when Layla started explaining how she'd taught herself basic first aid using library books and online videos, just in case Emily's condition worsened one day. The Richardsons' lawyer tried to suggest I'd coached Layla, that I'd planted these ideas in her head, but Layla shut that down fast. She pulled out her tablet and showed videos from 2 years before I'd even met them. A 7-year-old Layla checking Emily's blood sugar while on speakerphone with 911. The operator asking where her parents were. Layla saying they were at a charity auction and couldn't be disturbed. The prosecutor didn't need to say anything else. Emily testified next, also by video. She was 11 now but looked younger. Years of medical neglect had stunted her growth. She talked about being scared every time her parents left. Not because she'd missed them, but because she knew Layla would have to hurt her to help her. That's how she saw it. The needles, the medications, all necessary but traumatic when administered by another child. She said she used to pretend Layla was a real doctor to make it less scary. Jason was too young to testify formally, but Rebecca submitted his therapy notes. At 5, he was just starting to understand that sisters weren't supposed to be doctors, that parents were supposed to be home when you got hurt. His therapist noted he had severe separation anxiety from Layla. He thought she was the only one who could keep him safe. It would take years to undo that damage. Even Mia, the quiet middle child, had stories. She'd been the assistant, the one who handed Layla supplies and called 911 when needed. At 8 years old, she knew the dosages for all of Emily's medications. She could recite the signs of diabetic shock, kidney failure, and respiratory distress. She'd never had a play date because she might be needed at home. Her childhood stolen just as much as the others. The evidence was overwhelming. The judge bound the case over for trial on multiple counts of child endangerment and neglect. The Richardsons were released on bail but had to surrender their passports. They weren't allowed contact with the children except through supervised visits, which the kids refused. They moved in with Megan's mother across town. I saw Jeff at the grocery store once. He looked right through me like I didn't exist. The trial was set for 6 months later. Those months were strange. The Richardsons faded from the social scene completely. Their country club membership was quietly revoked. Their charity positions disappeared. Even their church suggested they worship elsewhere until things were resolved. Money couldn't buy them out of this. Too many people had seen those videos. Too many had heard Layla's testimony. The truth was louder than their lies. I focused on school and work. Senior year was starting and I needed good grades for college applications. My guidance counselor said my essay about standing up for what's right would make me stand out to admissions boards. I didn't want to profit from those kids' pain, but she said telling their story could help others. So I wrote about Layla's courage and Emily's strength, about Jason's resilience and Mia's quiet sacrifice, about how sometimes children save themselves when adults fail them. Rebecca invited me to Layla's 12th birthday party. It was the first real party she'd ever had. Just a normal party with cake and games and friends from school. No medical emergencies to manage, no siblings to monitor. Layla pulled me aside during the party. She said she was thinking about becoming a doctor for real someday, but a pediatrician, not a pretend one. She wanted to help kids the right way, with proper training and adult support. I told her she'd be amazing. The trial lasted 2 weeks. I testified on day 3. The prosecutor walked me through finding Layla with a first aid kit. The defense tried to trip me up, but I stuck to the facts. Just what I saw and heard and recorded. The jury didn't need my opinions. The evidence spoke for itself. Megan testified in her own defense. kids. She cried and said she thought she was raising independent children, that she never meant for Layla to take on so much responsibility. But then the prosecutor played the recording of her telling me to have Layla handle Jason's head wound. Her fake tears dried up real quick. Jeff threw Megan under the bus on day 7, said it was all her idea to leave the kids, that he'd wanted to hire a live-in nanny but she refused. His lawyer painted him as a weak husband controlled by his domineering wife. It was pathetic to watch. The prosecutor destroyed him with credit card records showing he'd planned just as many trips as Megan, that he'd been there for every abandonment. Every neglectful choice was made together. The jury deliberated for 4 hours, guilty on all counts. The judge called it one of the most egregious cases of neglect he'd seen in 30 years on the bench. Not because of physical abuse, but because of the psychological damage, the parentification, the medical endangerment, the complete abdication of parental responsibility. He sentenced them to 5 years each with 3 years supervised probation after. They'd have to complete parenting classes and therapy before any contact with their children could be considered. Megan sobbed when they read the verdict. Real tears this time. Jeff just stared at the table. Their lawyer said they'd appeal, but everyone knew it was over. They were led away in handcuffs while Rebecca held the kids in the hallway. The children had chosen not to watch, but wanted to be nearby when it ended. Layla hugged me after it was over. She said thank you, but I told her she'd saved herself. I just helped her be heard. The Richardsons sold their house to pay legal fees. Their cars, jewelry, everything liquidated. Megan's mother disowned her publicly, said she'd raised her better than that. Jeff's family rallied around Rebecca and the kids. They set up therapy funds and college accounts. They wanted to make amends for not pushing harder when they suspected something was wrong. The kids were finally surrounded by adults who put them first. I graduated high school with honors. My college essay about the experience got me into my dream school with a partial scholarship. My mom's business thrived. She hired 2 employees and started cleaning commercial buildings too. We moved to a better apartment, one where we each had our own room. We even got a cat. Normal life things that felt like miracles after everything we'd been through. I kept in touch with the kids through Rebecca. Layla joined Science Olympiad and won first place in anatomy. Of course she did. Emily's health improved dramatically with proper medical care. Her growth caught up and she started playing soccer. Jason got leg braces that helped him walk short distances. He joined a wheelchair basketball team and loved it. Mia discovered art therapy and started expressing all the feelings she'd bottled up for years. Her paintings were dark at first, but got brighter as time passed. The last time I saw them all together was at Layla's middle school graduation. She was valedictorian because of course she was. In her speech, she talked about the importance of asking for help, about how being strong doesn't mean doing everything alone. She looked right at me when she said it. After the ceremony, she introduced me to her friends as the person who taught her to speak up. I said she taught me about courage. We were both right. The Richardsons got out on parole after 3 years. They moved to Florida immediately. Started over where nobody knew them. Last I heard, Megan was working as a receptionist and Jeff sold insurance. No more country clubs or charity galas. No more kids to neglect. They sent letters to their children through the court, but the kids weren't ready. Maybe someday, maybe never. That was their choice now. Rebecca adopted all 4 kids officially last year. The court terminated the Richardsons' parental rights based on their criminal convictions and continued lack of insight into their neglect. The kids chose to keep their last name though. They said they'd earned it through survival. Rebecca understood. She's good like that. She posts pictures sometimes of normal family stuff. Vacations where adults handle everything. Homework help that doesn't involve medical procedures. Bedtimes enforced by grown-ups, not exhausted 9-year-olds. People still ask me if I regret getting involved. If I wish I'd just kept quiet and avoided all the drama. I tell them about the night I found Layla teaching Emily to check her blood sugar at 2 a.m., about Jason bleeding on the bathroom floor while his parents drank wine, about Mia knowing more about medications than most nursing students, about children raising themselves and each other because the adults who were supposed to love them couldn't be bothered. Then I ask if they could have stayed silent. Nobody ever says yes. My mom and I are good now, better than good. We survived the Richardsons' campaign against us and came out stronger. She still tears up sometimes when she talks about how proud she is that I stood up for those kids. I tell her she taught me that by working 3 jobs to keep us afloat, by never taking their bribes even when we were desperate, by showing me that integrity matters more than money. She's the real hero in this story. I just followed her example. I'm in college now studying social work. Probably not a surprise. I want to help kids who can't help themselves, to be the adult who notices when something's wrong, who speaks up even when it's hard. Professor says my experience gives me insight but warns about burnout. Says I can't save everyone. I know that. But I also know that sometimes one person speaking up changes everything. Sometimes one report saves 4 childhoods. Sometimes doing the right thing costs everything but pays back infinitely more. The Richardsons taught me that money and reputation mean nothing without humanity, that fancy houses can hide ugly truths, that children are stronger than they should ever have to be. But mostly they taught me that truth wins. It might take time. You might lose everything first. People might hate you for it, but truth wins. Those 4 kids are proof. They're free now. They're safe. They're kids. That's all that matters.